All right, here we go. Just do a couple, just to say we did. Walter Alameda had, I think, probably the top-rated question. How is it the nation mourns for a dead lion, but Planned Parenthood isn't all over the news for desecrating and selling dead baby parts? I only heard about the lion based on this question. I wasn't really on the news today. Florida hunter killed a lion. It was a lion that wasn't supposed to be killed. He was big game hunting in Africa. I think his name was Cecil. And this lion was kind of a well-known lion. And this guy shot and killed him, and now there's death threats against him and so on and so forth. And why do we feel this gigantic outrage over a lion when we don't feel it over humans that are being murdered and cut into pieces and sold for profit? Well, the reason is for the same reason that we despise the Nazis and we don't despise the communists. There's pictures. There's pictures. That's why. It's really that simple. This lion has a face, and it may not be a human face, but it's a face. It has a name. It's Cecil the lion. It's not just unnamed lion. It's Cecil the lion. There's video of Cecil the lion, and Cecil taking care of his females or his cubs or playing or tracking down. He's got a personality. He's got a name. He's got a face. The reason that we despise the Nazis appropriately is because the victims have faces. There's photographs of what happened in Auschwitz. There's photographs of people being rounded up out of the Warsaw ghettos. There's photographs of little children who are getting onto cattle cars. They're either going to die in the car or they're going to die when they get off on the other end. All the faces of these little kids that you see, they're all dead. They all died. Every one of these little kids is dead. They're people. They're persons. They're identities. They have individuality. We know who they are. And we don't feel that way about the communists, because if we did, there wouldn't be a single person in the world who would ever say, I'm a communist. If you saw the faces that the communists murdered, they murdered 100 million, 200 million people that make the Nazis look like pikers, but they didn't have pictures of them, so they don't count. When you're dealing with Planned Parenthood, they're not people because there's no photographs of them. Many cases they do have names, but probably the ones that are aborted don't have names. And so they're faceless, nameless. Stalin, the greatest murderer in history, Mao might give him a run for the money. But Stalin really said so many important things, and one of the most important things he said, he ought to know, by God, he's the greatest murderer in history. He said, 1 death is a tragedy, 1,000,000 deaths is a statistic. And it's true. There's millions of babies that are cut up for parts. That's a statistic. 1 lion is a tragedy. He's got a face, he's got an identity. And frankly, my first answer was going to be that the lion means more to people than thousands of babies, for this reason. If you could take a photograph of one of these aborted children and show pictures of the life that it would have had, if you could show pictures of it as an infant, if you could show pictures, just one, you don't have to do it with all of them, just one. If you could show pictures of it as an infant, if you could show pictures of it as a 2-year-old girl, running to meet daddy and opening her arms up and getting hugged and swung around, if you could show pictures of her learning how to ride her bicycle, if you could show pictures of her going out to her first, date on prom night, and you show pictures of her graduating college and throwing her cap up in the air, and if you could show pictures of that person that didn't get to be that person, then all of a sudden this problem would be over. Those people would be in jail for murder. But that's how it works, right? We filter out what we don't want to know. We filter out what we don't want to see. We all do this. I do this to some degree. I'm a big animal lover, and one of the ways I like animals is in cheeseburgers. If I had to watch that happen, I'd probably never eat another cheeseburger again. It's hypocrisy. It's just what happens, what's done. I actually, just to clarify that point, I don't have any problem with eating farm-raised cows or pigs. Their entire lives have been there. They wouldn't be there otherwise. That's why they're there. But I do have an enormous problem with the methods that are used to kill these animals. It's just horrific. There's got to be a better way than that. And I don't have any problem with a cow that's been out in a pasture for its entire life. But I do have a problem with a cow that's never seen daylight. I don't know. Am I splitting hairs? Probably. We all find our own comfort zones, right? But I think that's it, Walter. lion is named Cecil, and he has a face and a name, and he interacts with his family, and we know what he looked like. Now he's gone. All of these thousands and thousands of fetuses are just fetuses. They're just a number, and we have to personalize them, and this is what the left does so well, and it's what we can't figure out how to do if our lives depended on it. David Proctor says, a popular internet meme says, 6 years later you still have your guns, don't live in a FEMA camp, and we don't have Sharia law, so tell me how stupid that makes you feel. How would the leader of the Common Sense Resistance respond? I would put up a picture that would say, 6 years of trying to ban guns, 6 years of sympathy for those who want to cut off people's heads, and they've only been stopped through the hard work and efforts of dedicated patriots who are trying to stop this maniac, animal, terrorist, traitor. That's my response. They're trying to say, well, you're not in a FEMA camp. Look, the FEMA camps were never really on the table. The FEMA camps never really were going to happen. We're just going to have to settle for them knowing everything about us and monitoring all our phone calls and all the rest of it. And using the weaponizing the IRS against us and having the government intimidate us and prosecute us and throw us to jail if you're a filmmaker. And if you happen to be a filmmaker named Dinesh D'Souza, not only do you get to go to jail and not only do you get to wear a bracelet, but you have to have 5 years of a re-education camp to deal with your dangerous psychology. There's obviously something pathologically wrong with you. You need mental health care treatment if you're going to criticize the light worker. That's how I would respond to this nonsense. Barack Obama's calling for gun control every chance he gets. He never misses a chance to call for gun control. The fact that he didn't get it is not a sign that Barack Obama didn't want it. It's a sign that he failed because he's incompetent. He's an incompetent man. He's a coward. He's a weakling, and he's not very smart. He didn't get it, not because he didn't get it because he didn't want to get it. He wants to get it every single day. Every single time there's a shooting, he's opening his mouth about gun control. So you don't get to say you didn't get the gun control. What about this unfounded fear of Obama? It's not unfounded. He's trying to do it all the time. We stood up to him. We happen to win that one. And as far as the no Sharia law, really? Tell that to some people in Dearborn. Tell it to people in neighborhoods where they're pushing for Sharia law. If you're saying he didn't command Sharia law from the outset, it's not because he doesn't want to do that either. He's certainly doing everything in his power to make sure that we have 2 sets of law in this country, or 4 or 12. You know, if you're a black protester, you have your own set of laws and you have your own Justice Department. If you're a Muslim, you have your own set of laws and the Justice Department is backing you at the expense of the rest of the people in this country. So it's an absurd, ridiculous, pointless, childish, petty, stupid, dumb thing to say. The fact that he didn't succeed is not indication that he hasn't tried. And all the evidence indicates that he tried and is continuing to try. Next question. Zachariah Tiemens, who's got like virtually all these questions. You've talked about how thorium reactors will provide us with virtually free, virtually limitless clean energy for everyone. Isn't it more realistic and in line with human nature to expect that we will come up with infinitely more both essential and trivial uses for energy to offset its wider availability? If I understand this correctly, it's kind of the argument that says, hey, you know, we're never going to use 100 kilobytes of RAM. It's just inconceivable that you need that much RAM. Well, once you have 100 kilobytes of RAM, then the demand increases, and you know, now I've got I don't know, 64 gigs, maybe 128 gigabytes of RAM. It's not enough. So if your question is, will the energy demand increase to match the energy supply, I hope so. Burning energy for trivial reasons is what civilization is all about. You know, I mean, that's what makes life worth living, is the trivial burning of energy for non-essential purposes. And I can give you some good example of this. I have an airplane that is powered by 150 horses. My car has 306, I want to say. Do I need 306 horses of energy to take me where I need to go? I most certainly do not, but it's nice. And if I could get a car that had 600, I'd take it. The pointless burning of energy is what makes civilization worthwhile. And for those of you eco-weenies out there and you cognitively challenged types, well, have a car with 600 horsepower is ridiculous. Really? How many phones? I mean, how many songs do you have on your iPad or your iPhone? How many songs do you have, Mr. Alternative Music, hippy dippy, green loving, planet hugger? Because if you have more than one song, that's more songs than you need. I hate to break this to you, but it takes energy to record. Even alternative indie music takes energy to record. And it takes energy to reproduce, and it takes energy for your phone, and it takes energy to do all these things. And it's just a matter of you using energy differently than I am. I'm proud of the fact that I'm burning energy. You're trying to pretend that you're not proud of it, but you burn more energy than I do probably. By the way, Bert came down real hard on one of these events because somebody apparently at NASA is working on an electric airplane that gets a 100-mile range. And Bert stood in front of these people and said, "What happened to you? What happened to you? We used to be about laminar flow, about flying around the world on one tank of gas. You're talking about a coal-burning airplane that gets 100 miles range? You should be laughed out of the room." But it's electric. Right, where's the electricity being generated by? If it's back east, it's probably coal. You have a coal-burning airplane. Look, energy is civilization. Energy is technology. I'm sitting here using energy right now. You're using energy to watch it. I want endless energy. I want to run the air. I want my life to be 71 degrees all the time unless I decide I want it to be 74. I don't want to worry about it. I want to be comfortable. I've earned it. And when I say I've earned it, I mean my genes have earned it. I've tried to like to think that I'm contributing my small part, but my genes have earned it. We've struggled. My great-great-great-grandfathers were cotton carters. They were mill workers in textile mills in Lancashire. They were dirt poor. They died at 40. They had 11 kids. They sacrificed, scrimped, saved, and they had one little pot-bellied stove to heat the entire house. And the first thing you do in the morning is to break the sheet of ice on the little wash basin they had in the house. And before that, they were coal miners. And before that, they were peat harvesters that just sat out in the middle of the goddamn marsh and sat there with a big blade and a pitchfork and cut, compressed vegetable matter so they could burn it to stay alive. I'm the product of all of those people, and those people worked really hard to make life a little better, and I'm going to burn that energy for them. And I like the idea that there's a little silver golf ball made out of thorium, and it produces all the energy I or my entire family or my friends or all of my friends and their friends could ever use in the entire course of their entire lives. And there's no downside to it. It can't melt down. It's wonderful, beautiful. I love it. Check my privilege. Our friend Cheryl Twomey says, "You're damn right I'm checking my privilege. I check my privilege every day. I check it to make sure it's intact. My privilege belongs to the human race. It's a human privilege. It's a human privilege, and we've paid a very high price for it. And I mean to not only use it, I mean to expand it. I think we should be irrigating the deserts. You know why? Because we can. Because there's no limit to the amount of seawater out there. Just pump it. Desalinate it and pump it. What? Do you have any idea what that costs in energy? It's a lot of energy. So we got all the energy we need. I want the world to be a garden. And I want people to be able to do what they want to do. You see, if energy is free, this is going to come as a big shock to you, big progressives out there, because I know how much the idea bothers you enormously. In fact, I think this is the one thing you're actually more afraid of in the entire world. You know that guys like me like to burn energy because we're top of the food chain steely-eyed missilemen, and we fly airplanes and have big, fast cars. But the thing that really does concern you, in fact scares you, and I think you have nightmares about this, is if there were unlimited free energy, then there wouldn't be any poor people anymore. Poor people would be able to have motorhomes and ski-doos and snowmobiles and airplanes. Because if energy was really cheap, products would cost almost nothing. And then poor people would get to play too, which is what I want. I want everybody to be able to play. But of course, if there are no poor people, then you don't have anything to use as a fig leaf for your own power grab. And especially the fact for you progressives, if there's no poor people anymore, then what do we need you for? In other words, if we were to have all the energy we wanted to and have the kind of economy where anybody who's got a job can afford to have just about anything they want to in terms of fun, what do we need you for? How do you get to feel better than everybody else if there's nobody better for you to feel? I mean, if there's nobody poor and downtrodden because there's enough energy for them to be able to live their lives just like everybody else, what do we need big progressive douchebags for? You're obsolete. Of course you want to limit energy. You want to limit energy because you're rich. And you're educated. You're going to have all the energy you need. And if you limit energy, then those poor people, so sad. It's terrible. It's tragic what happens to them, poor things. Now you got poor people that you can use as a fig leaf for your power grab, for your power-hungry control freak minds that have to tell other people what to do. And because you're a champion of poor people, that means you can burn all the energy you want to, and that's okay because you're not one of those rich 1%ers. You're a genuinely caring person who cares about poor people on the planet. It's a giant scam, and every single day I'm more and more on to you. If we had all the energy we wanted, we wouldn't have poor people. Well, I'm going to correct myself. Of course we'd have poor people. We'll always have poor people. Do you know why we'll always have poor people? Here's why. You really need to understand this. We'll always have poor people. We'll just have rich poor people. Like in America, we have fat poor people. We will always have poor people, and here's why. Because if you have a spectrum of people, if you have even a very flat bell curve, there's going to be the rich here, there's going to be the middle here, there's going to be the poor there. You can't cut the end off of a bell curve without getting a new bell curve, and whoever's on the left end of that bell curve is going to be the poor people. When poor Americans are richer than 93% of the rest of the population of the earth, then poor doesn't mean what you want poor to mean. One of the pithiest things I ever said was in one of the first essays I wrote, but it's as good an example as anything. If you go to a club full of billionaires, the guy with $900 million is a chump, right? If it's a club of billionaires, if you've got $900 million, you're the laughingstock. You're the poor guy. You could set me up with $900 million. I could be the poorest guy in a club full of billionaires. I'd be delighted to be there. I wouldn't spend my time wondering about why they have more money than me. I'd be real grateful of what I could do with the actual money I had. This is how I live my life. That's why I never worry about rich people. I'm not a terribly rich guy, by the way. I haven't socked away money doing this. That's okay. I don't want to sock away money. I have enough money to do things like fly an airplane. That's what I want to do with my life. If I wanted to make more money, I would. I'd be in something a little more lucrative. But I never worry about people that are richer than me. It doesn't bother me. The only thing that bothers me is, can I do the things I want to do? If I can't do the things I want to do, then I have to work harder like I did to get this airplane, because I wanted the airplane, so I had to work harder for it, and I did, and I sacrificed. I didn't get anything new, and I saved it up, and then, boom, got it. It's mine. And by the way, one of the questions that has been asked when the Long Easy came up is this. Oh, I'd love to do that. I'd love to fly, Bill. I see you looking at that airplane. The airplane looks so cool. It looks like it'd be fun. I never really thought about it before, but I really want to do it, but I can't afford it. You've got to get that out of your head. First of all, if you go on Barnstormers, barnstormers.com, it's an aviation website where they sell airplanes. Just go to Barnstormers and look up Long Easy. You'll find on Barnstormers at any given time, 4 or 5 Long Easies for sale, ranging from probably, I don't know, maybe $18,000. There's a couple for $22,000, $24,000. They get better up at the 30s. Then they get much nicer around 40s. You can make a pretty compelling case that you don't want to buy a bottom-of-the-line Long Easy, but you know what? There are people that will do inspections for $500 and tell you whether the plane's any good or not. And there's a lot of great recommendations out there. Now, $22,000, let's pick a number. Let's say $30,000 This is the ballpark for what I paid. A little more than that, but it's in the general vicinity. That is achievable by anybody who has a job in America. How dare you say that? It's true. It's true. All you need is the discipline. If you have the discipline, you've got a good credit rating, $30,000 is not out of reach for any person who has a full-time job in this country. And when people say, well, I don't have that kind of resources, I didn't either. I learned how to fly in a glider port in Crystal, California, just on the other side of the Mojave Mountains, on the other side of the St. Gabriel Mountains, south of Mojave, and in the Mojave Desert. And I was flat broke. I was a limo driver. I had no money, none, zero, nothing. And I went out there and I worked for $50 a day, raking rocks in the desert at 115 degrees, and I got paid $50 a day and an hour of flying time. I don't know if that was an hour a week. It might have been an hour every couple of days. It certainly wasn't an hour a day. But I wanted to fly, and so I worked for it. And you can make that deal today. You can get there. You can get there if it takes you 2 years. Before that, I was a limo driver. I was taking helicopter lessons. They were fabulously expensive. $150 an hour. That was my spending money for the month. I just did it, and it's what I wanted. I didn't do anything else. I didn't have a chance to do that and fly. I gave up everything else to fly. And there you go. The planes are inexpensive. And by the way, I said earlier that James Redman's Long Easy, I'm sorry, James, forgive me for that. It was a slip of the tongue. I'm going to beat the snot out of me when you see me next time. James Redman's Bearcoot is the nicest aircraft I've ever seen, and I meant it. It's the nicest airplane I've ever seen of any price. It's the nicest airplane I've ever seen. That wasn't an airplane. He didn't buy an airplane. He had plans. He had sheets of fiberglass and carbon fiber. He had a couple of molded parts. He had to work and work and work. It's all he did. All he did was build this airplane over 15, 11 years, 20 years, whatever it was. And, I don't know the details of this, but when he got started, he could just go out and buy an engine. I mean, this engine's even used engines in low five figures probably, had to save and save and save and do things he didn't want to do because his love and his passion is in his garage. And he saved his money and he bought an engine and he put it on himself. And he didn't go to engineering school. He taught himself how to do all of this stuff. He taught himself how to do it. He has the nicest airplane I've ever seen out of love, passion, hard work, brains, and desire. And those don't cost a penny. Anybody who wants to get there can get there. Anybody. And if you don't believe me, you want to send me a message on Facebook, I'll tell you how. We'll sit down and we'll plot it out. You can learn how to fly and you can own an airplane. And these airplanes, what you get for what you pay, there's nothing like it. Just go to barnstormers.com, search for Long Easy, and keep looking. You know, some are turkeys. Most of them are perfectly fine. Some of them are spectacular. But even if you buy a turkey, as long as it's built well enough so that it's safe, it may be cosmetically ugly, but you have somebody who knows what they're doing do the inspection. You say, yeah, the wings are solid. It's not beautiful, but it's solid. It's not going to fall apart on you. Then you spend hours and hours and hours doing what James does all the time. Make it better every day. Gives you something to do. Gives you something to do. Something tangible, you know, and not just tangible in terms of like, look at this, is the most beautiful airplane in the world. I don't know what James would get for that airplane. He's never going to get what he put into it, needless to say. I mean, he's got millions of dollars of labor into that thing. But it's not a ski trip either, you know. It's an asset, and you can sell that asset when you get tired of it or you get too old or some major emergency comes up and it breaks your heart. But, you know, you get 6 figures easily for these Barracudas, easily. You know, some of these, a couple of $250,000, not at all out of the range for what you get. It's worth every penny. So, you know, there you go. You can get there, and you just have to understand that you can get there. We've got a couple more, I guess. Zechariah Tiemans again. What, if anything, about the Confederacy deserves to be celebrated or at least defended? The Confederates fought with incredible bravery. The Confederates fought with a great deal more dedication than the Union did. That's to be expected. The war was down there, and the war was for their independence. You know, they would talk about the Confederate armies coming north. Lee had, the Army of Northern Virginia had 2 big invasion attempts, one in 1862 that culminated in Antietam and one in 1863 that culminated in Gettysburg. And both times, especially the first time, they were just described as wolves. It's like human wolves. They hadn't eaten. They had no shoes. Fully a quarter of them, at least a quarter of them, just didn't have shoes. They're on these stony roads in Pennsylvania. These guys are fighting for what they believed in. They were incredibly tough, incredibly gifted. The first half of the war, all the great generals were on the Confederate side, and the second half of the war, all the great generals were on the Union side. But Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, just pulling out miracles of just audacity. They had the audacity because they had to. They were so badly outnumbered. You know, the Confederacy produced fewer manufactured goods than New York City. New York City produced more industrial output than the entire Confederacy. And they had one rolling mill, Tredegar Iron Works, or Tredegar, however it's pronounced, in Richmond. That's it. That's all the big weapons. Everything was made in this one factory. It's all they had. The North was pounded full of things. There's an awful lot about the Confederacy that I like in terms of states' rights. And look, people say that the Civil War was fought over states' rights. True, but it was the right to keep slaves. That's not property. They thought it was property, but it's not property. So in the same way, you know, it's the same thing. I've made this case before. I think it's a compelling case, frankly. You can say that that no one had the right to go down to a plantation and take away somebody's property. And if we're talking about cows and horses or rocking chairs, you're absolutely right. There's no justification for a war in that case. The South had a complete right to secede if it was property. But it's not property, it's people. And the argument that I think bears making is you can apply that same argument to abortion. You can say that a woman has a right to choose and that it's her body and it's none of your business. And if we're talking about, you know, breast augmentation surgery or any of the rest of it, that is entirely their business. However, a fetus, an embryo, it's not that woman. You could take any cell in her body and immediately type her unique among the entire population of the world. but the fetus doesn't have her DNA. It's got its own DNA. It's a combination of her DNA and the father's DNA. It's not her body. It's in her body, but it's not her body. And if you believe that the Civil War to end slavery was a moral cause because it was people, then you have the same right to say to people, well, this isn't your choice anymore. These are people. Now that's where the argument is, right? That's it. That's where it is. Anyway, well, I'm going to do one more. If we're going to do one more, I better make it count. I think I'll do two more. And these are geeky ones. It's kind of a not a terribly serious show. Dave Olson wants to know, have you seen Prelude to an Axar on YouTube? It's a crowdsourced Star Trek fan film starring Richard Hatch as a Klingon and Worf's brother as the head of the Federation. It's done as a Discovery Channel retrospective on the Earth-Klingon War, and it's phenomenal. They've done it on a shoestring. I have seen it. Go to YouTube and look to Prelude to Axanar, I guess. I thought it was an Axar. Maybe it's a misspelling. It's either A-X-A-N-A-R or A-N-A-X-A-R. I knew about it before then. I didn't know about it before then. I saw it, but it turns out I'm pretty good friends with Gary Graham, and Gary Graham plays the Vulcan ambassador in that. It's done like an interview many years after the war, and they do flashbacks to the war, and it's all the history of the Federation prior to the USS Enterprise. It's after the first Enterprise of Captain Archer, but it's before Kirk's Enterprise or Pike's Enterprise. And it is spectacular, and it's beautifully acted. It's magnificently acted, magnificently shot. I do have one problem with it, and it's my problem with all of the Star Trek stuff. That was not the case in the TV show, by the way. This did not happen in the TV show. They started doing it in Next Generation, and then after Next Generation, they did it on Voyager, and then they did it on everything else. But basically, I can sum up my problem with Prelude to an Axanar or an Axar or whatever is this. It's nice, Axanar. It's nice to have a starship that can go thousands of times the speed of light. Its effective combat range is about 50 yards. That's the one thing I can't stand about all of these remakes. It was not in the TV series. You saw it on Next Generation and all the rest, and then you saw it on things like Wrath of Khan as well. These starships are engaging themselves at extreme range, in some cases a quarter of a mile. You know, they're flying through the galaxy at multiple times the speed of light, and apparently their phasers run out if you go more than a mile away from the vehicle. And the idea of guidance on a photon torpedo is apparently something that hasn't happened yet. You know, we had guidance on a Stinger missile the size of my desk, but we can't put guidance on a photon torpedo apparently. And God knows that if you're more than, some extreme range, massive extreme range for Starfleet, Klingon, or let's say, a mile and a half, then it's a guaranteed miss. The sight of these gigantic spaceships trying to dogfight, but not even dogfighting in the way that X-Wings do, just this kind of maneuvering like this, and then to pass over each other, and they miss each other by, 30 feet. It's ridiculous. And if you look at the original Star Trek space combat, you never saw that. You never saw the two ships in the same shot. Now, that may be because they couldn't afford to do special effects. But if you look at like the classic episode, Balance of Terror, where the Enterprise is a destroyer and the Romulan bird of prey is a submarine, it's one of the best. I saw it recently. I couldn't believe how good it is. It's so beautifully written and acted. Balance of Terror is one of the best episodes ever. But you see the Enterprise, and it fires its phasers, and it fires its photon torpedoes out into the void. There's no sign of the ship out there. And then the Romulan ship gets rocked, and then the Romulan ship fires its giant plasma bolt, and you never see the Enterprise because it's a long way away. Cheryl says suspension of disbelief. It's not the suspension of disbelief. I'm with the suspension of disbelief when I don't have to look at the fact that a ship that's capable of traveling thousands of times faster than the speed of light is shooting at something it can't see. That makes sense to me. Even in warships, battleships like the Bismarck, the exchange between Hood and Bismarck, it took place at 26 miles range. They were just specks on the horizon, and they were able to hit each other with shells. It pulls me out of the suspension of disbelief to see these things firing at a range of 100 yards. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And Prelude is a particularly egregious violator of that. You've got these warp ships maneuvering through asteroid fields, and they're shooting phasers at each other and photon torpedoes, and they're 600 yards and they miss. And I guess they're trying to get like the visual wow effect, but it's like, I don't believe it. Now, if you want to put a spaceship in a asteroid belt, then have it hide in an asteroid belt. The whole purpose of Star Trek is we're dealing with ships. We're not dealing with fighter planes. That's Star Wars. They're ships. Treat them like ships. Put them out at range and have them fire long range at each other. Make it about ship-to-ship combat, not try to make it into, fighter combat, because it's not. It just looks ridiculous. It looks absolutely absurd, and that's a big problem for me. It didn't have to be that way. It wasn't that way originally. You want to have them, like I said, you want to have an asteroid belt? Hey, they duck out, they fire off a couple shots, they pop back. Maybe a couple of incoming photon torpedoes explode against the side of the asteroid. That's cool. That's what they did in Wrath of Khan. They had the Reliant on one side of this asteroid and Enterprise on the other. Fantastic. They weren't circling around each other. I don't know. Don't cross the streams is what I'm trying to say. We're going to do an accurate space battle thing. I don't know if we ever did. Meson guns and particle accelerators, charged particle, neutral particle, missiles, pumped lasers, all kinds of cool stuff there. I kind of think we did one on that. Detection is the whole thing. It's a long story. One final one. Two final ones. Rick Manhard, that's a great name. Dude, it's like gave you the most awesome manly name in the history of the world. They did a Mystery Science Theater episode once where they kept trying to think of like the manliest names ever. I forget what episode it was, but it was great. But Rick Manhard is a hell of a great name. I can't ever recall you ever mentioning model rocketry, so I was wondering if you ever did that as a hobby in your formative years. I did. I built every Estes model rocket there was. There were times when I got so desperate I actually built a Centauri rocket. I loved Estes, and of all the Estes rockets that I built, the Gremlin was a cool rocket. I built the Alpha like everybody else, with a wooden balsa fins. I remember the first time I launched a rocket, I about lost my mind. I just couldn't believe it. The coolest of the rockets that I personally ever built, and I still think it's the coolest one I ever saw, was the space transportation system. It was like a shuttle thing. It was a pretty tall booster with little wings on the back, and then an orbiter sat on the top of a little hook, little glider. And the thing would go up on the main booster, and it would come over the top on the apogee, and then as it came over the top, the glider would just let loose on its own, and then a parachute would pop out, and the booster would come down on the parachute, and the little orbiter would glide down. That was wild. There's another couple of really cool ones that had like a molded plastic kind of cockpit forward-facing thing. That was really just cool to do. So I love model rockets. One of the things I'm thinking about for big bat problems is I have this kind of time, usually on airline flights. I actually thought, I'm not joking sometimes about things like the Republic of Northern Idaho and weaponizing a Long Easy, and I actually thought to myself, could I devise and build an actual air-to-air missile? Could I do it? And I thought about it. If I was going to build an air-to-air missile, realistically, one that you could put on a Long Easy, could it be done? And I thought, well, if you put a couple of those big F rockets, D or F rockets, basically on a plastic tube, you'd get a mile out of that horizontally. And so, how would you steer it? These GoPro cameras that they put on drones now, they've got with the boosted Wi-Fi, they're flying drones out to 2, 3, 4, 5 miles in many cases. I thought if you put a GoPro in the front of a missile that looked kind of like an AMRAAM with steering fins in the front and steering fins in the back, you put a couple of F engines up there, slick it underneath the wing of a Long Easy, and you've got a GoPro signal and just got a guy in the back seat with an iPad. And somebody recommended this to me. The way to do it is you'd have the iPad. The iPad is looking through the GoPro. It's seeing what the camera sees, and basically you put your finger on the iPad screen, and wherever you move your finger, a little reticle goes with you, and the servos steer to that point. So you get in trail behind another drone, let's just say it's a drone, Predator drone. I'm in my Long Easy. I don't particularly like these guys invading the airspace of the Republic of Northern Idaho. And you roll in behind this guy. You let that thing go off the rails. The backseater is watching through the camera. He's watching this drone appearing, and all he's doing is keeping his finger on that. And if it starts to deviate, by moving his finger to the side, it's using just common servos that they use on these $100 RC airplanes. And you just fly it there, and inside the front of this thing behind the camera, you got a little bit of C4, let's say, and a little electric detonator, and you put a bunch of ball bearings in front of that thing, and then you fly this thing right into the back of the thing. And when you're right, last thing you see is you just hit the detonate button, and it just goes forward like a shotgun, and next thing you know, you shot down a predator drone from a Long Easy. And I think about these things in the real world, and then I put them into the movie. Because I'm going to have this Long Easy is going to be a weaponized Long Easy. Works real well for air to ground as well, by the way. You could fly a missile right off the rail on the bottom of a Long Easy, put it right over a ground target, and airburst it. And the further out you go, the wider the spread, which means the more likely you are you're going to get a kill. But the closer you get, the more powerful the punch. I think about these things because I have serious mental handicap and deep-seated emotional problems. Final question is Jeffrey Lee Devlin. What do you think of Ted Cruz blasting both Democrats and Republicans? I personally was glad to hear it. The person that attacks the GOP leadership in the same language that he attacks the Democratic leadership will be the next president of the United States. Mitch McConnell is not a Republican, and Mitch McConnell is not even a Democrat. Mitch McConnell is a lifelong politician. I don't think, I think I did the one on this, the big Borg blow-up. I don't think, has anybody ever seen Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid in the same room at the same time? It may just be a change of hairstyle and adding some ugly glasses. They're the exact same guy. They're both, Buck Fury Wist. That's an awesome name, Wild Goose. They're both politicians. I sat literally shoulder to shoulder with Mitch McConnell at a lunch back in 2009, and he was bragging about how he cut $10 billion from a $4 trillion budget. And that was $10 billion over 10 years. I mean, it was something like that. Maybe it was $100 billion over 10 years. $10 billion a year from a $4 trillion budget. Proud as he could be. He lied to Ted and the rest of the Republican senators about this Obama trade deal. And I think Ted Cruz, who I admire enormously, put it as succinctly as he possibly could. He said, we're allowed to disagree in the Senate, but we're not allowed to lie to each other. In other words, if he says, here's a deal, I think you should take it, and he says, I don't want to take it, then we disagree. But if he says, no, there's no deal, so vote for this, and then you vote for it, and you turn out he lied to you, then he needs to probably go to jail. You know? He certainly doesn't need to be, majority leader. I say things that sound really bombastic, and I know people sometimes think I say them for hyperbolic impact. In some cases I do, but sometimes I say them and I mean them. If somebody was running against Mitch McConnell, a young Democrat who had his own business, I would not only write that guy a check, I'd campaign for him. I'd much rather have a Democrat who ran his own business, who had to deal with real-world problems, than this guy as a Republican senator. There would be no Barack Obama if there was a Republican opposition. He never would have been elected if anybody had the courage to come out and say what they knew about him. If John McCain had said what was widely available to be known about Barack Obama, I think Barack Obama would have melted under the impact. And the only person who can say it is the nominee, because the press will spin everything else. But John McCain says, I think Barack Obama would make a fine president. Well, I guess I'll vote for him then, John. Why not? Ted Cruz had the courage to call Mitch McConnell a liar, because he's a liar. He lied to Cruz and he lied to the rest of the Republican senators. And when people hear you criticizing your own party, it gets them out of their trenches. You're not an ideologue anymore. You're a reasonable person. You say, the problem, by the way, it's not hard, guys. You want to win the next election. This is really simple. Just write this down. It's not about Republicans. It's not about Democrats. It's about Washington versus the people. You run against Washington, you're going to win every time. It's 10 after 8, and I think that'll do it for episode 99 of the Stratosphere Lounge. We'll talk to the guardian of the gates of fire, Eisenfire, and see what we can do about having a kind of a gala 100th episode. I wouldn't mind opening up the fantastic Stratosphere Lounge here and having guests and just kind of having a party here. I think that'd be a fun way to do it. So I don't know whether we can do that in a week, but we can probably do it within 2. In any event, it was Space Mutiny. Yeah. If you've never seen Mystery Science Theater 3000, rent it. And if you want to pick an episode, see Space Mutiny, where Mike and the bots are trying to find the manliest names they can and just keep coming in. It's just about fell out of my chair. I was laughing so hard. Anyway, that's it for the Stratosphere Lounge, episode 99. My sincere apologies for having waited until I think it was an entire month we went without one. It just got worse and worse and worse. But we're back, and we'll be back with the actual 100th episode. Unbelievable. It's amazing what people will listen to if you don't charge them money for it. Until then, thanks again for your membership and your support. Thanks for all the kind words for when I was not feeling so great. And as always, keep looking up, and can't wait to hear what the call sign's going to be. It's going to be racist, or it's going to be, windbag or jaw flapper or something horrible like that. And they're going to enjoy it so much, and I'm going to enjoy it too, although God knows well, I told ViperCheck, if it's not Starlance Mock Killer or something like that, then we're going to pass the hat and get that airfare back. I'm going to be brutally disappointed. I can feel it coming. Good to see you guys. Thanks. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.